Hey, it's Mr. Kingsbury, and today we're going to be discussing the Unit 2.03 notes, which truthfully are just more example problems of polynomial long division. So last time when we were looking at polynomial long division, we looked at basically dividing trinomials and four-termed polynomials by binomials. We also talked about how you need to have all of the terms there. That is, there must be a term for every exponent, starting with the largest exponent and working your way down. So if you're missing an x squared, you put in a 0 x squared as a placeholder. Today what I want to do is up the ante a little bit. We're going to see some problems where there are missing terms, but now we're going to be dividing some larger polynomials by trinomials. So it gets a little bit more difficult, but it's really not that bad. I think the biggest issue is that people get stuck in their head. They get all up in their head because there's so many variables and so many terms, and it gets a little overwhelming. If you take it just one piece at a time, it should be much more manageable. So let's take a look at number 1 on your notes there. The problem is this: 6x to the 4th minus 17x cubed minus 39x squared plus 32x plus 48, and we're going to divide that by x squared minus 3x minus 4. The first thing I'm going to look for is that I have all of the terms there that I need. So over here in this first one, in the dividend, the biggest exponent is x to the 4th. So I need to be sure that I have a term with x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared, just x with no exponent, and then a constant, so no variable at all. And it looks like I have those: x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared, x, and a constant. Then I'm going to look at my divisor, the thing that I'm dividing by. It looks like the biggest exponent there is squared, so I'm going to need an x squared, check, an x, good, and then a constant. So it looks like I don't have any missing terms, which is wonderful. The only other thing I'm going to do is put a 1 in here. It is implied that the coefficient is 1. I don't like implied stuff. I want to know what I'm working with, so you will see me almost always put a 1 in there for missing coefficients. So now that we've established that we've got everything we need, let's set up the problem. We've got 6x to the 4th minus 17x cubed minus 39x squared plus 32x plus 48, and we will divide all of that by 1x squared minus 3x minus 4. And remember, our steps are divide the first terms, then multiply, then subtract, then bring down, and repeat. So I realize there are a lot of terms here. I think there's 5. I don't care about all of those to begin with, nor do I care about these extra 2 terms here. I'm going to look at that term and that term, and I'm going to figure out how many times is 6x to the 4th divisible by 1x squared. And I'm even going to do it in parts. 6 divided by 1 is 6. And x to the 4th divided by x squared is x squared. 4 minus 2 is 2. So I'm going to put that up here. That's my first step, divide. The next step is multiply. I'm going to multiply all 3 of these terms by 6x squared, and I'm going to put the result underneath these 3 terms. So let's start with the first one. 6x squared times 1x squared. 6 times 1 is 6. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th. So far we're doing great. I want this first term to match the first term in the polynomial here. I want it to be exactly the same. Then we're going to multiply negative 3x and 6x squared. Negative 3 times 6 is negative 18, and x times x squared is x cubed. And then we will multiply negative 4 times 6x squared. Negative 4 times 6 is negative 24, and I don't have an x to multiply x squared by, so it will stay x squared. That's step 2. Step 3 is subtract, so I put a minus sign here, and here, and here. And where there are 2 negatives, that becomes a positive. So now we're subtracting down. It's really more combining. This will always cancel if we're doing things right. And it does. Negative 17x cubed plus 18x cubed. The x cubes will not cancel out. They will not change. They will not in any way, shape, or form be affected. They're just going to be x cubes. That's all. What will change is the coefficient. Really what I'm looking at is negative 17 plus 18. So if you owe someone 17 bucks, you have 18. After you pay them back, you have more than you owe them. So after you pay them back, you still have $1. And then lastly, we have negative 39x squared plus 24x squared. Similar situation. I got the x squared going on. Negative 39 plus 24. You owe someone $39. You pay them 24. You end up still owing them 15 because you didn't have enough to pay them all back. Then we bring down the plus 32x. And we repeat. Only now we're going to use this term and this term. So how many times is 1x cubed divisible by 1x squared? Well, 1 divided by 1 is 1, and that's a positive 1, so I'll put a plus. And x cubed divided by x is x squared. So there's my division. Then I multiply. First I multiply 1x squared and 1x squared. This should not be squared. This should just be an x. I apologize for leading you astray. X cubed divided by x squared is just x. Those kinds of things, they can hurt you. The downside to long division is if you make an error at one point, it follows you for the rest of the problem. So 1 times 1 is 1, and x times x squared is x cubed. Exactly what I wanted. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3, and x times x is x squared. And then 1x times negative 4 is negative 4x. And now we will subtract, subtract, subtract. 2 negatives make a positive. 2 negative makes a positive. And let's combine down. 1x cubed minus 1x cubed is 0. That cancels. Exactly what we wanted. Negative 15x squared plus 3x squared. It's going to be something x squared. Negative 15 plus 3 is negative 12. 32x plus 4x is 36x. And then we'll bring down the 48. And now for our final time. Now we're going to take negative 12x squared and divide it by 1x squared. Let's start with the numbers. Negative 12 divided by 1 is negative 12. And here's the interesting part. X squared divided by x squared is just 1. It cancels out, if you will. So there are no leftovers. These are the same. So I don't need to put an x up here. And it makes sense. If you look at my answer, look, x squared, x. So I would need a constant here because, you know, the exponent gets smaller as we go to the right. So this works. This works beautifully. That's the division part. Next, we need to multiply. So let's multiply negative 12 and 1x squared. Negative 12 times 1 is negative 12. I've got x squared. I have no x's to multiply it by, so it stays x squared. Then we've got negative 12 times negative 3x. Negative 12 times negative 3 is positive 36. I have an x with no other x to multiply it by, so it stays x. And then lastly, we have negative 4 times negative 12. That's positive 48. Lastly, then I need to subtract. So minus, minus. I shouldn't have put that plus there. It gets in the way. Typically, my rule is I don't put the pluses down. I just put the minuses when it's time to minus. 2 negatives make a positive. Negative 12x squared plus 12x squared is 0. 36x plus negative 36x is 0 x's. And 48 minus 48 is also 0. So I got all zeros, which means there is no remainder. And that's problem 1. Took a little time, didn't it? When these get bigger, they definitely take more time. Let's look at number 2. And I don't want this video to get too long, so I'll probably do 3 examples and be done. But I will post a completed version of this, so if you want to look at the other ones, you can. So number 2 is 5x to the 4th minus 10x cubed plus 12x squared. That's a 4 right there. Doesn't look like it. Minus 16, and then that's divided by 5x squared plus 2. First thing I'm going to look for is, do I have all the terms? Well, let's see. I've got x to the 4th, x to the 3rd, x squared. I have no x. So I need to rewrite this with that placeholder. 4x to the 4th minus 10x cubed plus 12x squared. And then I'm going to put in a plus 0x, then minus 16. Let's check the other one now. So I got 5x squared. I should have something with just x and then a constant. Well, I certainly have the constant, but I don't have the just x. So I need to put a placeholder in there. So I'll put a placeholder 0x in there for you. Let's set this up. 5x to the 4th minus 10x cubed plus 12x squared plus 0x minus 16. And we will divide all of that by 5x squared plus 0x plus 2. All right, our steps: divide, multiply, subtract, bring down, repeat. So let's divide 5x to the 4th by 5x squared. 5 divided by 5 is 1. X to the 4th divided by x squared is x squared. That's step 1. Step 2, multiply. 1 times 5 is 5. X squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Now we got to do with these other ones. Look, 1 times 0 is 0. X squared times x is x cubed. And then 1 times 2 is 2. And x squared times no other x's just remains x squared. And we go minus, minus, minus. 5x to the 4th minus 5x to the 4th is 0. Negative 10x cubed minus 0x cubed is negative 10x cubed. 12x squareds minus 2x squareds would be 10x squareds. Please note I'm putting a positive sign because this was a positive number. Then we're going to bring down the 0x. Don't be scared of it. It's not going to hurt you, I promise. Let's start our process over. Now we're going to take negative 10x cubed, and we will divide it by 5x squared. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. X cubed divided by x squared is x. So now we've got our division done. Now let's do our multiplication. Negative 2x times 5x squared. Negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. X times x squared is x cubed. Negative 2x times 0x. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. X times x is x squared. And negative 2x times 2. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 4. And we got an x times nothing, so that's just x. Next step, we subtract. Minus, minus, minus. And anywhere I see two negatives, I make it a positive. So I have negative 10x cubed plus 10x cubed, that's 0. It's exactly what we wanted. 10x squares minus 0x squareds is 10x squares. And 0x plus negative 4x is negative 4x. And then lastly, we're going to bring down the negative 16. And we start it all over again. 10x squared this time divided by 5x squared. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and that's a positive 2, so I'm going to put a plus there. X squared divided by x squared is nothing. It's I don't want to say it's 0. It's technically 1, but they cancel each other out. So I'm not going to put any x's up here. And that ends the division step. Then we got multiplication. We'll multiply all of these by 2. 2 times 5x squared is 10x squared. 2 times 0x is 0x. And 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract, subtract, subtract. 10x squared minus 10x squared is 0. Negative 4x minus 0x is negative 4x. And negative 16 minus 4 is negative 20. So, oh, we have a remainder. Almost forgot that part, sorry. So we will add our remainder up here. We'll go plus, and then remember we make a fraction, right? So we'll put negative 4x minus 20 on the top there. I feel like I made a mistake here. This is two negatives that make a positive. So this should be positive 4x, which makes this positive 4x. My bad. Let's make that a little plus. The negative 20 is correct. And then remember on our remainder fraction, we put this guy, 5x squared plus 2. Remember, we always put what we're dividing by on the bottom. And that was a horrible circle. Unfortunately, I don't have an undo button. Wow. Well, this is getting longer. I would like to do one more for you, but they seem to be taking a long time. And I don't want to kill you too much with this. You've certainly seen a couple of them. One was particularly long with missing terms. But I'd like to do one more. So I'm going to do number 4, which is 27x cubed minus 1 divided by 9x squared plus 3x plus 1. And once again, the first thing I'm going to do is check and make sure all of my terms are there. And immediately when I look at this first one, I've got an x cubed. I don't see an x squared or just an x. So I'm going to rewrite this as 27x cubed plus 0x squared plus 0x minus 1. And then we will divide that by 9x squared plus 3x plus 1, which is not missing any terms. X squared, x, none. So 9x squared plus 3x plus 1. Excellent. So, oops, sorry. So now that I've made those adjustments, I can set my problem up and do my division. So let's see. 27x cubed plus 0x squared plus 0x minus 1. And then out here we will put 9x squared plus 3x plus 1. And let's do it. So step 1, divide. We're going to divide 27x cubed by 9x squared. 27 divided by 9 is 3. X cubed divided by x squared is just x. Step 2, multiply. 3x times 9x squared. 3 times 9 is 27. X times x squared is x cubed. 3x times 3x. 3 times 3 is 9. X times x is x squared. And then 3x times 1. 3 times 1 is 3. X times no other x's stays x. Put our little line. And put a minus, and a minus. 27x cubed minus 27x cubed is 0. We'll just cross that off. So we'll get some x squareds here. 0 minus 9 is negative 9x squareds. And then we'll get some just x's. 0 minus 3 is negative 3. And then we'll bring down the negative 1 and start it all over again. Oh, this is exciting. So negative 9x squared divided by 9x squared. Negative 9 divided by 9 is negative 1. X squared divided by x squared cancels out, so there are no x's that go behind the 1. Step 2, multiply. Negative 1 times 9x squared. Negative 1 times 9 is negative 9. And I've got x squared, but I'm not multiplying it by any x's, so it stays x squared. Then we have negative 1 times 3x. It's going to be negative 3x. And negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. And we will subtract, subtract, subtract. All three of them become pluses. And then let's combine down. So negative 9x squared plus 9x squared is 0. Negative 3x plus 3x is also 0. And negative 1 plus 1 is 0 too. So there is no remainder. Life is good. By the way, when you have something work out like this where there's no remainder, we call that a factor. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in class.